I think that just as we're living in a nuclear age, we have grown so tremendously in scientific knowledge. It doesn't seem too much to say that men can begin to awaken to the fact that they haven't grown enough spiritually and haven't recognized their spiritual capacities.
Once something like eating is death, then you've struck at the very heart of life. The enemy of the older radical theories may have been the ruling class, but today the stakes of whether we will reform ourselves into a new kind of human being, a new kind of society, whether we will find selves worth being, the stakes of it are simply life itself.
This is a segment of Dr. Jeremy Cowan's final session on Wendell Berry's book, The Art of the Commonplace. And in this session, he discusses the use of our labor and the proper use of our property. I hope you enjoy this, and if you want more of this series or this kind of thing, hop on over to the Morin Academy Patreon to see how you can get in on this and other classes.
So, right use, or the moral conditions of the gift. So the first requirement of right use is remembering the giver. Again, that quote or that scripture, when thou hast eaten and art full, then thou shalt bless the Lord thy God for the good land which he hath given thee. And that gratitude, in a sense, especially when we are expressing it genuinely, transforms possession into participation. And as long as that gratitude remains genuine, it keeps us from that use being converted into abuse. Because the ungrateful user forgets their dependence and slides into this kind of hubris, which is exactly what we see today, especially among those people who no longer really have to worry about working for a living. That hubris is, in a sense, what Berry calls the great ecological sin, or the great sin of politics. And that the practical takeaway from that is that daily thanksgiving is not just sentimental, it's moral recalibration. And if we're not constantly looking at what it is that we're being blessed with, and it doesn't matter who you attribute the source to or what you attribute the source to, even if it's your own hard work, recognizing those things that you have and being grateful for them is a way of ensuring that you don't take them for granted, and thus the work and the source, the resources, the land, and those parts of creation that provided those things. So the second condition, right? The first was gratitude. The second is neighborliness and justice, right relations with others and with the unborn. And what he means by the unborn is that nowhere can we live. Okay, there might be one or two places on this planet, but for the most part, there's no place that we can live that our life is not in that place. Our life is not somehow impacted by prior generations, people who paved the roads, dammed or diked the river, who set policy, who put in traffic lights, that every place is shaped by those people who came before. And while we can't predict what the people who come after us will do with the place, we can be sure that people will come after us. And if we act in a way as to respect, sorry, what was that? I heard something. Just a hiccup. If we act as though those people those unborn people, those people yet to come to the place, have as much, I don't want to say right, but capacity to shape the place and become part of that place, um, that our actions in regards to that place, our actions in regards to the people in that place, again, our neighborliness and the justice that we treat those who are here and those who are yet to be here, that those things will all align in a more just, kind, generous, and charitable manner. So, from that, the third condition is good husbandry, which is effectively preserving the source or using those resources that we have without destroying them. And he mentions things like mining and other things that don't really have that are really hard to preserve the source on, because once you've pulled them out of the earth, you can't really put them back, at least not in man's timeline. And so that if we are going to be good stewards of our place and those resources that it gifts us, that we need to ensure that what we're doing is not taking away the potential for that to continue to support people moving forward. And so, in a sense, it's an ethic of proportion and foresight. Foresight, which he grants that we very seldom have sufficient of, because you never know which way the political winds or the climactic winds or any other winds for that matter are going to blow. That the best that we can do is to take only what we need and protect the source for those who come later. It may be us who comes later, and it's just that we need to have more forward thinking in our use of resources. But regardless, the point is to act with a conservative mindset, not politically, but as far as conserving those resources. So some of the things that might look like saving seed from things that you've planted rather than just going out and buying them from somewhere else. There's practical benefits to that outside of economics. Leaving wild buffers, not tilling fence row to fence row, and leaving places for nature to take its course and potentially contribute to the place. Um, and again, mentioning that Sabbath, leaving the land to rest, leaving ourselves to rest for a period. And then what he brings it to is that good husbandry has the potential to join, or doesn't have the potential. It's defined by joining skill with virtue. To just have skill makes you an expert, but to to transition from expert to husbandman or husbandwoman or however you want to put that term, really requires virtue of doing it well, but for the right reason. Knowing how to use it, knowing how to do it well, um, and doing it well because doing it well is the right thing to do. And so that what he would call proper use joins love, work, and accepts the limits, which are all the core tenets of good stewardship. I think that jumped faster than I was ready. I gotta be careful of this mouse wheel. It jumped the wrong way. So again, those three virtues: gratitude, which roots us in humility; neighborliness binds us to our fellow travelers and creates the basis for a just and um, profitable world for all. And husbandry, which implicates love into this kind of trajectory. And so together, those are what Barry calls the ecological discipline of the promised land. And so this might be something that you might take a minute to ponder about, like what is one habit or one practice that in your life you could better express gratitude for, share more, or in some way express better neighborliness or better husband. And just that's not a question to answer out loud, but just wanted to ponder on, like, what is it that we could be looking at doing in our own lives in a more whole and um, disciplined manner. So from there, he's going to turn from these principles to which are like the moral condition to a moral skill. And what is that? This was a quote from there. He's talking about the bird nest rule, I think he called it. And if you ever come across a bird nest and there's a mother and young, that you can take the young but leave the mother to continue to be able to breed or to be able to continue to be fruitful and replenish the earth, I guess. All right. So he's given us these conditions of right use, gratitude, neighborliness, and husbandry. And then he asks, well, what does that look like in our daily lives? And his answer's pretty direct and in a sense radical that charity must come from acts. And those acts aren't enough in and of themselves if they aren't attended with some skill and ultimately love. And this is where he's laying out a theology of work. And so his insistence in this is that love without craft is just sentiment. And this is why I've got this picture of a craftsman, I guess, or at least an AI interpretation of a craftsman with the backwards blade on his draw knife. Um, so in a sense, he's going to redefine charity at this point, and not so much as out of benevolence or pity, but it's enacted love. It's the love that we all say that we have to, the true definition of love. Love is something that's given, it's service, it's real care, and it's not just platitudes. And so with that, he says, because when our gratitude to God and to creation and this land that we're being gifted as part of our time here in this mortal plane, if you will, um, that in order for, I'm not sure if in order for, to be fully expressed, it's not, its complete expression would be, it would look a lot more like loving everyone than putting your um, putting all of your charitable eggs in one basket, I guess. I'm not sure how to put that, but effectively that if you are doing good work and you are living those principles of gratitude and neighborliness and husbandry, that the kind of the um, what's the word? The logical consequence of that is that that love grows until it includes all of creation. That is true charity is an expression of love for all of creation. Now, when we partake in or act with charity, it's generally targeted at something or someone specifically. It's not just this abstract, and this is something that he really gets into, this abstract idea that we're going to make the world a better place, but it's actually taking the skills that we've developed through our right livelihood um, and turning those to the benefit of everyone. And part of that skill, it's not just so much that you can create the nicest rocking horse as a woodworker or, the most beautiful painting as an artist or um, Michelangelo's David or any of these things. It's not in the particular act as it is in the act plus the love of those who you intend for that act to benefit. Um, I'm jumping around a little bit. It's getting me off track, but um, so where I'm getting with that is charity cannot be selective because everything's connected. Everything has to be taken care of. Like a lot of the stories, this is me kind of taking a little side trail. A lot of the stories that we hear about environmental degradation, about um, inhumane acts of violence, or um, any of those things that really get your blood boiling when you hear it on the news, that many of those things start as, well, I'm going to start this kind of a business. I'm going to try to provide this service to my neighbors. And then it just kind of runs amok in a sense that, when the Waltons started Walmart, it didn't start as an international mega conglomerate. It was a much smaller adventure, and that grew and it grew until it became something that it wasn't. And somewhere in that growth, and I don't want to say that Walmart and the Walton family have any ill intent because I can't prove it, so I'm not going to bother tonight. Um, but insofar as Walmart is very often looked at as a scapegoat for some of the ills of capitalism, among other things, that somewhere what hopefully started as a charitable service, and when I say charitable, meaning that I want to make sure that my neighbors are able to purchase the things that they have and they don't have to travel 2 hours away to go get them, um, transformed into something that really no longer took on that air. And that could be said for all sorts of things, the kinds of activities that result in polluting rivers and polluting the air, that most of those things start as an expression of the skill and maybe the charity, maybe the gratitude, but at some point that was where most things have started, and then they get lost and become destructive. And so this is where I think he's turning the idea from livelihood or just livelihood to right livelihood, taking those things that we can do to serve others and make our own living from an economic perspective from, and organize them in a way that ensures that they are sustainable and that they remain as a moral and virtuous expression of our own love of creation. And that work, as it's being developed and as we gain more skill, that skill and that love turns that work into a life-sustaining rather than a life-destroying exercise or practice. And from here, he kind of goes off on the Judeo-Christian tradition, or at least the way that it's typically taught. We're often taught in Christian theology that we need to have our aim towards heaven, that we have to be looking towards God, and our goal is heaven. And so we're always in this mode of looking up from a religious or spiritual standpoint. And that turns into very quickly a neglect of the gratitude that's required of all of those things that we are literally standing on right now, both physically and metaphorically. And that if we don't allow ourselves the space, the time, and the attention that it takes to remain grounded, in a sense that as we as we forget the gratitude or the things that we should be grateful for here in this life, that it debases us in a way that eventually makes it almost impossible for us to continue to keep our aim heavenward, I guess is probably a good way of saying it. Um, and so what he's trying to do, I think, is trying to help the reader realize that if you don't remain grounded in your work, and that if you don't spend the time, the patience, and shed the blood, sweat, and tears required to really develop the skill necessary to do that work well and to do that work in a way that sustains you, it sustains the work, it sustains the resources that the work requires, and that it allows future comers to be able to also do that, that we jump off of the moral path. We jump off of that straight and narrow path to heaven, and all out of losing track of those early principles that he was talking about of gratitude and neighborliness and husbandry. And so he's now taken this idea of skill and right livelihood and joined the discipline required for that good work with love. And that once we've gotten to a level of competence or skill that allows us to meet all of those, not meet, but exemplify those principles through our work, that that's where our hands meet our hearts. Um, and then he goes off on the industrial mindset or the industrial, what did he call it? The industrial system. And the relevance of that, or the reason that I'm making that transition right now, is because he's going to now critique a culture. One of the foundations of culture that I think both enables that moral, virtuous, right livelihood type of existence, but at the same time also enables the destructive mindset, the destructive potential that we have as those dominators of nature that he started off the discussion with. Um, and so another kind of thing to think about as we move forward is what daily work in your own life could you look at more as an act of reverence than just a simple drudgery. I think often our work can become a drudgery, but if when undertaken in reverence, is something that brings more love and more skill, kind of builds off of itself. And are there any professions now in this day and age, I guess you might say, that more readily fit that idea of a right livelihood?